before the cameras, before the spotlight. Before the world spoke his name with reverence, he was just another invisible face in the crowd. There were no medals hanging in his room, no trophies, no promises of glory. There was only a boy, swam with restless eyes, with a racing heart, and with a mind that couldn't seem to find peace anywhere. At school, they called him a walking failure. They said he was hyperactive, distracted, impossible to control. He heard it, and it hurt. It hurt to be constantly reminded that he was different, that he would never amount to anything, that he had no future. The adults said he needs limits. But what he really needed was space to breathe, a place where his inner chaos could turn into clarity, a sanctuary where his mind would stop screaming. And he found that place in the water. There, the noise of the world went silent. There, the judgment disappeared. There, he stopped being the problem and started becoming the blueprint for something extraordinary. Swimming, in the beginning, wasn't about winning. It was about emotional survival, about finding peace, even if just for a few minutes, about proving to himself that there was still something inside worth protecting. And that something grew. It grew through the pain. It grew through the hours of training. It grew with every dive while the world was still asleep. The water transformed him, and he, silently, began turning the impossible into routine. He wasn't born a champion. He was born questioned, knocked down, underestimated. And that's exactly what shaped his character. Because when you learn to fight early, when no one claps for you, when all you have is faith and effort, you develop something that can't be bought. You build an inner code, a pact with destiny. He wasn't trying to be the best in the world. He was just trying to survive himself. But by doing it with discipline, faith, and purpose, he ended up becoming the greatest of all time. This isn't just the story of Michael Phelps. It's the story of everyone who has ever doubted, of everyone who has ever ignored, of everyone who carries the burden of feeling different. And if he did it, so can you. Not because it will be easy, but because now you have the pattern. He didn't seem destined for greatness. In fact, it looked like the world had already chosen his place. The margins, while other boys collected school awards, applause from teachers, and praise for good behavior, Michael collected warnings, disapproving looks, and the constant feeling of not being enough. As a child, he was diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. His mind raced like a hurricane. His body didn't obey simple commands like sit down or be quiet. And that marked him. Not as a creative child, but as a burden. He was the boy who couldn't stop moving, who frustrated teachers, who irritated classmates, and deep down, he felt ashamed of himself, without even knowing why. The cruelest pain isn't physical. It's the pain of feeling like a mistake in the world. But his mother, Debbie, saw something no one else could see. She didn't look at her son with pity. She looked at him with faith. Faith that within that restless boy, a sleeping genius was waiting. And all he needed was the right place, the right environment where his soul could finally breathe. She was the one who took him to a swimming pool for the first time, and there, for the first time. Silence. The water was different. It didn't judge him. It didn't say he was too much. It embraced him. And in it, Michael found control, focus, rhythm. At just 7 years old, what seemed like just another attempt became a refuge. And that refuge became passion. And passion turned into purpose. Swimming taught him things school never did. The importance of repetition, the beauty of effort, the power of consistency. While the world labeled him troubled, in the pool, he discovered he was simply misunderstood. And it was in that space between chaos and calm that the seed of the impossible was planted. He was still just a boy. No titles, no fame, no guarantees. But now he had direction. And sometimes, all a giant needs is a path to grow. In the water, Michael wasn't just swimming. He was building a code, a silent pact with pain, an intimate friendship with sacrifice. And so began, without the world even noticing, the journey of the greatest Olympian of all time. But back then, he was still just a boy, lonely, skinny, different, who just wanted to find a place where he could finally be free. Every hero, sooner or later, meets someone who forces him to look within, someone who isn't intimidated by his flaws, someone who doesn't just see what he is, but what he can become. For Michael Phelps, that someone was named Bob Bowman. It wasn't a meeting filled with hugs and kind words. It was a collision of energies. A restless, rebellious young man, and a methodical, demanding coach, obsessed with excellence. Bob wasn't just looking for swimmers. He was forging soldiers. He worked in millimeters, in details invisible to the average eye. And that's exactly why, in that skinny kid with disproportionate arms, he saw something others didn't: a sleeping monster. Bob didn't hand out compliments. He didn't sugarcoat. But he made one thing clear: if you want to be the best in the world, you're going to suffer like no one else. And Michael accepted. That's when a new cycle began, a new level of discipline, a new pact with sacrifice. While other kids trained 5 times a week, Michael trained 7. No breaks, no rest, no excuses. While friends went out to party, he went to bed early, ate like an athlete, breathed like an athlete, thought like an athlete. He swam in the morning. He swam in the afternoon. He swam on holidays, even on Christmas, even when he was sick, even when he wanted to quit. And when he complained, Bob would simply ask, "Do you want to be ordinary or immortal?" The question echoed, day after day, stroke after stroke. Because this wasn't just about swimming fast, it was about killing the fragile boy and awakening the warrior. The man who would be remembered not for victories, but for being unbreakable. It was during this process that Michael began showing the world something different was being born. At just 15 years old, he qualified for the Sydney Olympics, the youngest swimmer on the U.S. team in nearly 70 years. He didn't win a medal that time, but he did something more important. He broke his first world record. The world stopped. The media buzzed. Who is this kid? Where did he come from? They didn't know yet, but they were witnessing a new archetype, a new standard, a new symbol of overcoming. The journey had begun, and with it, the transformation. Michael wasn't swimming for medals. He was swimming for something deeper, swimming to prove he could control the mind that once nearly destroyed him. And so, the boy once rejected, shaped by the rigor of a relentless mentor, took his first steps toward eternity. Every great hero has a moment, a breaking point, a moment when the world stops ignoring him and starts fearing him. For Michael Phelps, that moment came in 2004, at the Athens Olympics. He was no longer just a prodigy, no longer the kid with potential. Now, he was a silent shadow growing over the other athletes, and no one quite knew how to deal with it. Michael didn't talk much. He didn't smile backstage. He didn't chase cameras. He just trained and trained and trained. While most swam to win, he swam to exterminate doubt, to kill the old version of himself. That rejected boy, insecure, too restless for the world. In Athens, at just 19 years old, he stepped onto the starting block as a young man, but he dove in like an animal programmed to win. 6 gold medals, 2 bronze, and the message was clear. The world saw a body swimming, but behind that body, there was something far more powerful, a bulletproof mind. Michael didn't swim like the others. He didn't panic. He didn't sprint aimlessly. He was a machine of precision. Every stroke felt calculated, every turn executed with surgical accuracy, every breath rehearsed as part of a bigger plan. And when they asked him about his performance, he said little. But his eyes carried the certainty of someone who knew. This is just the beginning, because the real goal wasn't to conquer Athens. It was much bigger. He and Bob Bowman had mapped out an insane plan to break Mark Spitz's record, to win 7 gold medals in a single Olympic Games, not just to match it, but to surpass it. It wasn't just a dream. It was an obsession. And for that, he knew the price. To sacrifice his youth, to sacrifice his body, to sacrifice any trace of normal life in exchange for greatness. While other athletes needed external motivation, Michael cultivated something internal, a pact with pain, a contract with the impossible. He was the kind of man who smiled through suffering, who swam with cramps, who did 1,000 repetitions until the muscle failed, and then did 10 more. That turning point wasn't just a podium. It was a declaration. From that moment on, the world understood. Michael Phelps wasn't just a swimmer. He was a biological phenomenon, a mind sharp as a blade, an athlete programmed to rewrite the destiny of history. But he still wasn't satisfied, because the real battlefield was still ahead, and the world hadn't yet seen what he was truly capable of. The invisible boy had become visible, but his name was yet to be etched in fire onto the pages of eternity. The world applauded. Rivals feared him. Oh my God. Michael thought only of one thing: Beijing. There was a plan from the very beginning, from the insane 5 a.m. workouts, from the days with no breaks, from the icy pools and the hidden injuries. There was a plan drawn with surgical precision to conquer the impossible. The world called it madness. Bob Bowman called it possible. And Michael Phelps, he said nothing. He just executed. Year after year, training after training, pain after pain. Everything he did pointed to one single destination: Beijing, 2008. At those Olympics, the whole world watched wide. He was no longer just a talented young man. He was a mythical presence in the water. The expectations were insane. The pressure, inhuman. 7 events, 7 golds. That's what Mark Spitz had done in 1972. Michael wanted 8. No one had ever done it before. No one believed it could be done now. But he didn't hear the doubt. He heard the echo of every workout, the echo of every silent stroke, the echo of his own promise to the impossible. And then, race after race, miracle after miracle, ... He began to make history. Victory in the first, gold in the second, world record in the third. By the fourth, he was already a legend. But it was in the 7th race that the world nearly came crashing down. The 100-meter butterfly final. Michael had a bad start. He was behind, and with just a few meters to go, he was still losing. But the difference between a champion and a monster is in the fractions of a second. In those last meters, Michael gave one final push. Not for the victory, but for the pact he had made with his past. For the boy they once said was incapable. For the kid who was told, "You have no future." And he touched the wall before his opponent by 0.01 seconds. The tightest finish in Olympic swimming history, but just enough to keep the invincible march alive. In the 8th and final event, the 4x100 medley relay, Michael Phelps closed his performance with what felt like a work of fiction. 8th gold medal in a single Olympics, world record, eternal glory. There, in front of billions of people, something was born that would never be repeated. The greatest performance in Olympic history. But even in the midst of all that celebration, even with the world at his feet, Michael was exhausted. Physically, mentally, spiritually, because the top of the mountain is the loneliest place there is. And it was in that moment of ultimate greatness that the shadows began to creep in. But that belongs to the next chapter. He had conquered the world, broken records, shattered human limits, entered history as the greatest Olympic athlete of all time. But there was something no medal could cover. Something no glory could silence. A void, a hole in the soul. After Beijing, after total triumph, Michael Phelps didn't feel invincible. He felt lost. He had dedicated every second of his life to swimming, since he was 7 years old. Everything was training. Everything was goals. Everything was control. But what happens when you achieve it all and still feel incomplete inside? With the end of the Olympic cycle, the schedule disappeared. The goals vanished. The purpose dissolved. And the silence that once calmed him in the water now became unbearable outside of it. Michael began to sink. Depression, isolation, anxiety. The mind that once took him to the top was now the battlefield where he fought just to survive. He tried to hide it, smile for the cameras, live the celebrity life. But inside, the pain grew, silent, invisible, relentless. What no one saw was that the greatest Olympic champion in history was thinking about ending his own life. Yes, him, the man with 8 gold medals, the symbol of athletic perfection, the global idol, almost gave up. Michael was arrested for drunk driving. Twice public shame. Sponsors pulled away. Fans were disappointed. But none of that hurt more than the internal truth. He didn't know who he was without the water, without the stopwatch, without the podium. His entire identity had been built on victories, and now, without them, he felt empty. That's when a new breaking point came. This time, not in the pool, but within his own heart. Michael sought help. He checked into rehab, faced the shame, looked at the wounds, and began to rebuild himself not as an athlete, but as a man. He started to speak about mental health, about depression, about addiction, about the crushing pressure to be perfect. And in doing so, he found something he never found on the podiums: freedom. That's when the true champion was born. Not the one who breaks records, but the one who heals his wounds and reaches out to heal the wounds of others. Michael Phelps's journey was about to begin again, but this time with a new fuel: purpose. Because when you conquer the world, you become famous. But when you conquer yourself, you become eternal. The world wasn't expecting it. No one believed it. Not even he was sure at first. But there was something inside Michael that had not yet been silenced. After the fall, after the rehab, after the pain, clarity came. And with it, a persistent whisper in his mind: you still have something to say. He didn't need to come back. He already had everything: fame, records, legacy. But now, he wanted something greater than victories. He wanted to show that it wasn't perfection that made a champion, but the courage to keep going even when broken. He went back to training, but this time, not to conquer the world. This time, it was for him, for the wounded man, for the father he wanted to become, for the symbol he could be. His return was criticized. They called it vanity. They called it stubbornness. But he didn't listen, because now he was free. In 2016, Michael Phelps arrived in Rio de Janeiro as a veteran. The body was no longer the same. Youth had passed, but the mind was a temple. There, he didn't compete with the boys. He competed with the past, with his own ghosts. And in every race, every dive, every turn, he swam with the peace of someone who no longer had anything to prove to anyone. Even so, 5 gold medals, 1 silver. The world watched in awe. The legend had returned, and he was better than ever. But the greatest gold of that Olympics wasn't the one they hung around his neck. It was the one he carried in his chest: peace. For the first time, Michael Phelps swam with lightness, not like a machine, but like a whole man, healed, aware, grateful. There he closed his final Olympic Games, not just as a champion, but as a master, a symbol not only of talent, but of redemption. Michael Phelps left the pool not just as the greatest Olympic athlete of all time, but as living proof that true victory is not what you conquer with the body, but what you rebuild with the soul. And as the applause echoed, as the crowd celebrated him, he knew, in silence, the lost boy had become the complete man. Michael Phelps broke records. He earned 28 Olympic medals. He reached the highest peak an athlete can reach. But deep down, this story was never about swimming. It was never about numbers. Never about external victories. It was about conquering himself. He wasn't born ready, wasn't born strong, wasn't born special. He was born with fear, with pain, with doubt. He simply learned not to run from it. While the world chased comfort, he chased discipline. While others ran after applause, he dove into silence. While most trained to win, he trained to transform. Michael Phelps understood early on that the real opponent wasn't in the next lane, but in his own mind, in the fatigue, in the inner voice whispering, "You won't make it." And it was that voice he chose to face every single day, with sweat, with pain, with faith. Because he knew, either you master your mind, or it masters you. That's the code, the formula, the secret no one sees behind the scenes. It's not talent, it's not the body, it's the mindset, the pact with pain, the willingness to do what few would dare. For long enough, Michael Phelps wasn't made to win. He made himself. Stroke by stroke, fall by fall, day after day. And that's why his true glory is not in the medals, but in who he became to deserve them. Now that you know the story, now that you've seen the journey, now that you understand how he reached the top, only one question remains. And you? What are you going to do with this? Michael Phelps didn't get lucky. He had vision. He had discipline. He had faith. He had the courage to face the parts of himself the world preferred to ignore. While many looked for shortcuts, he searched for depth. While many quit because they didn't see fast results, he kept going, swimming against time, against expectations, against himself, because he knew the impossible is not a limit. It's a test. It's a filter. It's the womb of something eternal. You don't need to be a swimmer. You don't need a pool. You just need a real reason, a definite decision, a commitment to your best version. The code is right in front of you. The choice is yours alone. Will you live like everyone else or fight like the few? Will you drown in your fears? Or will you swim with courage toward your purpose? Michael did his part. Now you are in the lane. The starting signal has sounded, and the world is waiting for your dive.